Hello, friends. Jamie Hepworth here, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to create more hope. Let's understand the anatomy of hope, so to speak, and what it means to be able to have hope, and in whom we can have hope, and like what's included in that. How do we create that? Especially as it pertains to the relationships that we have with other people in this crazy world where there are a lot of things that seem to undermine our ability to have hope. So let's go ahead and look at some ideas here. To get started, I want to share a scripture that I absolutely love that is in the Book of Mormon, Another Testament of Jesus Christ. It is my favorite book, and if you haven't read it, I recommend that you do. And the scripture there says, "Wherefore, whoso believeth in God might with surety hope for a better world. Yea, even a place at the right hand of God, which hope cometh of faith, maketh an anchor to the souls of men, which would make them sure and steadfast, always abounding in good works, being led to glorify God." There's just so much in that verse to unpack, but I love this phrase especially, that whoever really believes in God is going to be able to hope for a better world with surety. Like nothing doubting. You can totally know that things can be better than they are right now, and that they can continue to grow in that, and that we can be the right hand guy or gal of God, that we can work closely with God, have a relationship with God, that we'll be able to create to a greater degree. Faith and creation are very intimately linked in my mind. And I'll show you a little bit of what I mean about that. If you haven't yet watched my presentation, it is good. How to make important things happen through your faith, then I recommend that. But yes, creating is a matter of faith. And so that's one aspect to this. It also talks about when we believe in God, that gives us an anchor to our souls that keeps us grounded, and it can make us sure and steadfast. We can be dependable. We can continue being consistent and focused on what is right, and that we can bring forth good works that glorify God. So I want to talk a little bit about what does that mean to be good? What does it mean to glorify God? What does it mean to transcend the things that would draw us away from being able to be present? These are important things in a world where things seem sometimes to be breaking apart to a greater degree. This is the model that I love to share in teaching my students the process of creation, but this is also an archetypal pairing of concepts. And you're going to see this everywhere you go. If people have three things, you're going to see that there's basically three parts that always can fit in somewhere in relationship to each other. Just watch for this. I'm telling you, you're going to see this pattern everywhere. And this process of creation is really a process of planting, or being able to enact faith and deciding what it is that you're going to create, right? And then investing in that by actually doing it. And then stewarding is another aspect to creation. And that means that the plants don't take care of themselves, that you do the things that you need to protect them and to give them the nourishment that they need in order to be successful. And then the last part is to harvest, that we see what kind of fruit we got and we decide, do we want to save the seeds from this harvest, or do we want to plant something else? Do we want to can this? What do we want to do? What do we want to do with the things that we've created? And how do we live from a place of feedback so that we're always in flow and being able to operate with gratitude and acknowledgement? Those are some of the pieces of harvest. So there's plant, steward, and harvest in this process of creation, or what I've deemed the law of gestation here. And this is a good way to create. The bad way to create, or the way that's going to bring some heartache, is through the law of expectation. And I explained that in my It Is Good video. So you may want to go watch that again. But the law of gestation, this is a good way of being. This is a good way of creating. And it's a standard that we can always look to for being able to move forward in the flow of things. So if we feel like we're stuck in any one of these areas, then we can investigate to say, how do I get clear in any of these areas? I'm going to show you a little more insight in these as we go along. But first, I want to read this quote. I read this in the book, A Happy Pocket Full of Money, which was very good and interesting. And I also disagree with it slightly. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. So this quote from this book says, praying without ceasing is going through the whole day, every day, with focused intention for all your life's desires, with certainty, detachment, and gratitude. So in the self-help world, we have lots of people promoting the ideas in The Secret, for example, and these ideas of like, oh yes, everything that you want, whatever you want, go for it, create all the things. And I actually disagree that that is appropriate, although I do recognize the importance and the psychological wildness that not having our desires acknowledged, even the bad ones, makes it so hard to be able to even overcome the bad ones, right? And so there's a place for acceptance in acknowledging our desires. In fact, I believe that God wants us to create the things that are really the desires of our hearts, and there's ways of purifying those and recognizing them, and it comes with actually acknowledging them. But there's a sense here, especially if you're talking about creating money. Money is a tool, right? It's an energetic element or a way of being. It talks about here having all of your life's desires, having a focused intention for all your life's desires with certainty, detachment, and gratitude. And I think the certainty and gratitude pieces are huge, but detachment is one that I take a slight issue with. And the reason being, yes, when you're creating a physical thing, you can have detachment to it. You can recognize that you're okay both without this item, and that you'd also be very grateful if you had the item. But what if we're talking about relationships with other people? Should we be detached from other people? Should we see them coldly or without caring about the outcome? It's an interesting question. And I believe that detachment is not the answer, but an understanding of natural law is one piece of this, and understanding stewardship, so that we still care, that we're still reaching out with love and support for others and seeking to foster relationships. But I don't think that detachment is the kind of thing that we're going to want if we're really going to build up a more hope-filled world, even though that can be a state that is utilized in the creation of things, which is different than shifting relationships. I think really hope has a lot to do with the kinds of relationships we have with other people. Here's another scripture from the Book of Mormon that I love, and this is what it says. It says, wherefore there must be faith, and if there must be faith, there must also be hope. And if there must be hope, there must also be charity. And except you have charity, you can in no wise be saved in the kingdom of God. Neither can ye be saved in the kingdom of God if ye have not faith. Neither can ye if ye have no hope. So we learn in these scriptures the importance of faith, hope, and charity. And we also know that you need every aspect. You need faith, you need hope, you need charity. And this is talking about the kingdom of God. To me, the kingdom of God is the most hopeful thing you can imagine. And it's a system of relationships to each other that that are done according to God's order of things, and that are a higher order than simply exchange. And that's kind of where the money issue comes in. You know, money is really about an energetic exchange. Here, I'll give you this thing, and then you can give me that thing, right? And a lot of times we base exchange off of how much can I get out of people with how little I can give, right? But the kingdom of God is not going to be like that, and it isn't like that, right? And so we need faith, hope, and charity. Let me show you a little bit more about what I mean about that. Faith, hope, and charity can be seen in these same three pillars of the concept I love to share regarding creation, right? Planting is one aspect, it's basically faith. And stewarding is the aspect of hope. And harvest is charity. So you see that I have both red arrows and blue arrows here, and that is because there are both masculine and feminine energetic aspects to every single one of these pillars. And when you can understand both the masculine and feminine aspects of things, you will be able to understand how you'll catch the vision of right and wrong and what works and what doesn't work in building relationships and creating outcomes. This is important. So before I start getting into masculine and feminine energy and talking about what those forms look like and how to recognize those, I'll just talk a little bit about natural law, because that's essentially the form of morality that is universal and that is based on the concepts of masculine and feminine principles. So the feminine principle of natural law is basically, it's called the non-aggression principle, and it's that a person never initiates violence against another person. Now this is not to say that force has no place, but it doesn't have a place in the concept of the feminine principle. Rather than engage and fight, feminine will flow away from that which is a violation of her, and I'm saying her, but I'm like talking archetypally here. The feminine energy flows away from that which does not properly steward it, but it never initiates violence. It says, okay, I'm going to go over here and do this thing. So it's kind of forward moving feminine energy. It's in a flow, it's in systems, it's in cycles, and it never initiates violence. It only seeks to cultivate life in as much as it's received input that is life-giving. The masculine aspect or principle of natural law is that it utilizes enough force to defend and protect property. So what is one's property? It is whatever one is responsible for or that one owns, although I want to get away from ownership here. We're talking stewardship as a principle of morality. And I think ownership gets us more into that law of expectation and demand, and takes us out of a relationship with God. But when we look at property within the context of stewardship, then this masculine principle of utilizing just enough force to defend and protect property, or what is our responsibility, becomes a really good thing and a really important thing. People are not meant to be acted upon as objects. People are meant to be agents over their own property, which includes their ideas, their beliefs, their emotions, their choices, their consequences, their bodies, their feelings, all those things, right? And we also have physical items that we own, but basically your conscience and your ability to act on that conscience is your property. And I firmly believe that when we have taken full responsibility for the things that are ours, our capacity for liberty increases. This is like a law, an equation that rules all things. The greater capacity for liberty, the greater responsibilities we will take on. The greater responsibilities we have, the greater liberty we'll have. They go together. Liberty and responsibility cannot be taken apart. A lot of times people like to talk about the rights that they have. First of all, most people do not actually understand what is a true right. And I like to look at rights in terms of natural law as well. A natural law human right is any right which every single person can simultaneously claim without forcing another person to serve their needs, right? And so that means that there's a lot of things that we claim as rights that infringe on other people's rights, so therefore they're not a right. So if we want to have more harmonious societies, we need to look at what is actually ours, what is actually somebody else's. You don't have a right to force yourself upon someone else, force your opinions on someone else, to dictate that they use their conscience in a certain way. But there are responsibilities that are associated with those rights. To the degree that we are good stewards over our responsibilities, the greater capacity we will have for liberty and for the protection of life. And fundamentally, I lean towards life. I believe in cultivating and supporting life, and also agency and will. And when you see a society that is going in the direction of tyranny, it's because a lot of people are not taking responsibility for what is theirs. And so they're losing it. But this is an inside job. It's something that shows up in a society as a symptom of what a lot of people are doing from within their minds and in their homes and in their communities before you see it influencing the whole world. But obviously we're having more and more situations happen in the world where people are not anymore acting based on natural law. It's more the law of the jungle. How do we take things by force because we know better than you? And the answer is personal responsibility. That will solve a lot of these things within the context of natural law. And I would add even supersede it, but I'm going to start here with the natural law aspect. You get a little bit more into this masculine and feminine energy. So if we're going to understand what's right and wrong, or this idea of property, then we need to understand more about what masculine energy is, what feminine energy is. How do we know who is responsible for any given outcome? The person who is responsible in any given outcome will act more with a masculine energy. Okay. And so can men and women act with masculine energy? Yes, they can. And I'm going to show you, though, the types and roles and forms where those are archetypally applicable. And if you disagree with me, I'm happy to hear what you have to say in the comments section below, but just roll with me here. Whoever is responsible for the outcome ultimately acts with more masculine energy. And the individual or part of the whole who is acting as a receiver and a magnifier of the energetic direction of the one who is responsible will act more with feminine energy. And I believe that when we are more polarized in our masculine and feminine energy, not like 50-50, more like in the 90-10 sort of direction, 90-10 masculine, feminine, or 90-10 feminine, masculine. Did I get that right? You want to have 90 of one part and 10% of the other. So you can see that whole spectrum. The 10% is enough to soften that hole in the other direction, to temper it a little bit, but it's still really strong. In our relationships, the more that we are polarized, I believe the more of a harmonious balance we experience. Although if we are not experiencing a harmonious balance, then we can just learn from the experience, and that's fine too. So here are some words that describe what masculine and feminine energy sort of look like, how they express as a function, to give you some ideas of what they're like. Masculine energy, it plants, tills, organizes, decides, commands, differentiates, known and is known. It acknowledges, it's an agent unto itself. It acts, it offers, leads, judges, stewards, is clear, presides, provides, protects, supports, directs, observes, defines, oversees, cultivates. It gives direction, it calculates and evaluates. It's linear or sequential. It knows objects' names, it forms strategy. It's objective, boundaries oriented, goal or outcome oriented. It's focused on the present and the past. A lot of what is masculine is, society or the cultures which we spring from. Words and language are often masculine. It's left brain, reason or logic tend to govern it, law and order. It's also doctrine and knowledge. It's like kind of like all the things that we know and the direction or movement of, here is a command. This is the instruction. That's going to be more on the masculine side of things. What does the feminine side of things look like? So feminine is the soil or dust. It's the environment or the womb. It's a wellspring of life. It nurtures, it receives and then gives back, transmutes. It magnifies, it appreciates, it follows or allows, it translates, it initiates transition. It initiates into mysteries. It makes things possible. It senses or experiences, it synthesizes, it's inspiring, it's attractive, it grows, it gestates and burrs. It's very mysterious. It holds potential. It's a vessel, it's a medium, it's circular or cyclical. It feels, expresses, imagines. The feminine is primarily held within the present and moves toward the future. It discerns function. It is acted upon. It is subjective, intuitive. Feminine is often the realm of chaos. It's expansion oriented. It's adventurous. It dreams. It has visions. It's mystical or miraculous. There's a symbol and image more associated with the feminine side of things. It has more to do with principles and bigger whys. The spirit or intention is where the feminine is also based. It has a lot to do with the temple or the mountain. It's about holy space. It's holistic. It's more right-brained. I believe that feminine energy is a substance of faith in many ways, and that it has to do with nature and wisdom. So those are some ideas that I associate more with the masculine side of things and the feminine side of things. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts and ideas related to those, but how do you know what really is masculine or feminine? If you're not seeing this, I think it's really helpful to ponder on the sex act basically, and think about what are the kind of relationships that will create life. What are the conjugal relationships that will, or conjugal experiences that will create life? I'm talking literally physically here. You'll notice that the sexual organs of men and women express in these ways, in these masculine and feminine ways, right? We have like direction-oriented sperm that have that goal of fertilizing that egg, and then we have this feminine womb that receives it and transmutes it and gives it back and nurtures the thing, and holds the space for it until it's able to come forth. Masculine sexual organs are outside the body, and feminine sexual organs are from within the body, right? And this is not to say that men and women, all people can express masculine or feminine energy, or the type of things that we do and the energy or approach with which we do different things, or that we embody them. But the most harmonious applications of masculine and feminine energy will be within the context of an understanding of proper stewardship. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of those relationships too. I have a slide a little bit later here, but this is a quote from Joseph Smith that I really love. By proving contraries, truth is made manifest. I think that really relates to this masculine and feminine idea, right? Like proving contraries, this idea of polarizing the masculine and feminine aspects in creation together brings forth a child, right? It like shows us the fruit of itself. So there's a spectrum of behavior or choices, and they can be more masculine or more feminine. But I believe when we are able to polarize in those, both from within and without in our relationships with other people and our relationship to God, we are able to learn what is really true, what is really the truth. So I talked about planting, stewarding, and harvesting. I just want to show you a little bit of some masculine and feminine terms that are related to each of those concepts. So within the concept of faith, right, or planting a seed, trying to create this goal, you have a masculine side, which has more to do with seed, right? It's like the objective thing, like I want to plant an apple tree. So this is something I've decided on or determined, right? I'm committed to doing this thing. I know what I'm doing and I have a beginning and an end in mind, right? That's kind of the idea of seed. But the other aspect of planting with faith involves soil, which is that there's an environment, right? The kind of womb of an environment of the soil. It allows, it receives the seed, it trusts and is open to the process and will give some feedback, right? We'll see that this seed, once it's planted, it's held in this place. And so you can see some masculine aspects and some feminine aspects. Let's show you some masculine and feminine aspects of stewarding. Within the context of stewarding, we kind of have the gardener, right? The more masculine side, and the garden, more feminine side. And you can see we have some different roles that people play here. But if you have a gardener, like the gardener is the one that is responsible or conscious, right, for the garden and for the outcomes that happen. It's not the garden's fault if the garden doesn't bring forth fruit. Sometimes we have really sucky gardeners, and that's okay if people are sucky gardeners. But I'm just saying you're not going to get the kind of creations that you want if you're not looking at this stewardship aspect, like the masculine taking personal responsibility for the things that we decide to steward it's just absolutely vital, right? And the feminine, it does hold that potential, right? It is responsive to the things that this masculine energetic is giving forth to support this goal. And so so what are some of the inputs that we're having as gardeners on the gardens that we're trying to create? And how does this relate to our relationships? I've got several relationships here that I've listed, and I'm going to explain those a little bit in another slide, so we can see more how that breaks down. But I hope you're seeing this pattern of masculine and feminine within the context of stewardship. This third part that we have has to do with harvesting, and harvesting looks like, in the masculine side, it looks like gratitude, boundaries, respect. It's holding truth. It recognizes things, it stores things. So if you were making a harvest of a situation that was on the, kind of the masculine approach to that, would be to say, all right, we're going to can, and things need to be meeting these conditions in order to maintain this. I'm going to recognize the quality of the fruit here and decide if we're going to keep this and plant it again in the future, right? It understands and respects the things that have come forth. And it gives it the support for it to be used beneficially. Now, the feminine sort of energetic approach to harvest has a lot more to do with transmuting. It has to do with forgiving. You know, if there was something that didn't turn out well, it's like, oh, what didn't turn out well? How can we make do with this? Can we compost it? Are we going to learn from this, right? It has a lot to do with acknowledging what was there and having a sort of loving approach to things. And it does transform the harvest in some form. So, and that has a lot to do with charity, right? Charity is recognizing truth with wisdom and also love. It's like, how can I take what I've been given here and make the very best use of it so that things can be richer going forward? I think that's the essence of charity. So in this process of the law of gestation, though, I want to focus more on stewardship, as I mentioned in the beginning. But I utilized, you know, every aspect of this and showing you the masculine and feminine aspects of each one of these pillars, because the stewardship piece, like every piece affects all the other pieces, and this stewardship piece is fundamentally concerned with operating within the bounds of natural law, which has a masculine and a feminine aspect. And when we respect and understand those, things work more harmoniously. So let's go back here to steward, where we see that we have gardeners and gardens, and we have different roles. And I want to show you where we will have the best outcomes when we put these roles in these different categories. So as I mentioned, the masculine is the role that is responsible for the outcome. The feminine is the role that is responsive to the one that's responsible. So this, in the context of working with elements or working with things, right? It's one thing to be working on objects, but people are not objects. As I brought up in the beginning, we're not meant to be slaves. So how do we have these relationships in a way that is not slavery, but that is harmony and that is beautiful? I believe that looking at things in these relationships in this way, in a polarized way, will bring forth more harmony. When we look at God as playing a more masculine role in our lives, and then we play a more feminine role, I believe we have more harmony. I believe it is the plan, at least within the context of a mortal experience, that God acts as the masculine and the feminine acts as an individual that is responsive to God. We can all be sort of handmaidens for God, if you will. And you can see that in the way that God communicates. God gives us instructions and then we receive them and we choose to act on them. And when we do act on the instructions that were given through God, through our conscience, then we're able to make things better. And I apologize, my baby's out in the hall. My hubby here is grabbing diapers. Hey babe, will you grab my battery pack for me in just a minute? It's just plugged in. Oh wait, it's just down here. My laptop is getting low on power. It's just, can you hand me that right there? I apologize for the delay. Thank you, babe. My baby's getting a diaper change and he does not like that he's not in the room. Oh, with us. So, apologize for the delay as we get this set up. Oh, sweet baby. Oh, sweet buddy. Daddy's coming to change your diaper right now. I love you, buddy. I'll be out in a little bit and Daddy's going to change your diaper right now. Okay. So, in the relationship with God, the goal is to act from a more feminine place in relationship to God, which means that we are able to receive instruction from God and transmute it and bring it forth. There are some times where God inspires us to act from with more ownership or, taking a more of a masculine stewardship over things. And I think that really plays out in the relationships in the family, for example, or if we have, um, there's lots of places, like in the personal missions that we fulfill, we have uh, some mm, more masculine responsibilities, like in church callings, for example. Um, at church, there are assignments that we're given oftentimes to fulfill. And so if I was going to be a leader of the organization over the women, so to speak, there would be more of a masculine sort of responsibility of leadership over the group than a feminine, like, responsiveness to that leadership, right? But in our relationship with God, God gives the instructions and then we do our best to receive them. And he helps to support us and to help us be able to bring things forth that he's asking us to do. In the relationship of marriage between a man and a woman, there is a husband and a wife, right? And the husband, I believe, rightly acts with masculine energy and the woman acts with more feminine energy. And I say rightly in that it's going to bring forth more harmony in the relationship if that is the case. Obviously, everybody gets to choose what they're going to want to do, but how many people do we hear talking about how it's so difficult, because their husband isn't doing their thing, they aren't like leading in the home. And I think that there is an aspect of that. Not only do the men oftentimes not act with masculine energy, but the women do not act with feminine energy. And so it makes it harder for the masculine to devote to the feminine. And then the feminine disrespects the masculine leadership. And like a lot of times women will be really nitpicky about how things are done and they don't allow their men to lead. And that's kind of part of what contributes to that. And there's also just a culture of trying to create weak men and emasculated men that we have going on here that I think also facilitates this disconnect in relationships. But the more that men lead and that the women submit from masculine and feminine energy, it's not to say that a woman doesn't have stuff that she leads herself, but I think that makes a more harmonious relationship between them. But it's worth trying out, right? We can experience both. I've experienced both in my marriage for sure. And I've noticed that the more I go into feminine expression rather than masculine expression is in relationship to my husband, better results I have. The more cared for I feel. In the relationship between parents and children, the parent is predominantly acting from a masculine energy and the child is acting for more of a feminine energy. And there's obviously, there's a caveat to this because children grow up and learn how to take care of themselves and then they get to be responsible for their own choices in their own life. But I think, there's kind of a sliding scale where things kind of start shifting and turning, but it's like, who's really responsible for this child? Well, you're the steward, you're the parent. And so the child cannot be responsible for themselves yet. They will be, but it's a process of kind of gaining ground. I had one of my clients ask a question about, you were talking about, boundaries and like, what are other people's stuff and what is our stuff? But what about in the case when you're a steward over a child and your greatest desire is that your child is going to learn how to be capable and righteous and good and all of these things. So that is a godly thing to be a parent and to desire the best things for our children, that they reach their potential and that they're able to make choices that honor God. And sometimes we have cultural expectations that get in the way of saying, this is the only way that a person could do that. Sometimes people really are making destructive choices, and that's heartbreaking to our hearts. I've learned that the older my children get, the more that, shifting from that masculine to that feminine place and on kind of honoring that they're responsible for stuff, that if I can be responsive to the fact that they're taking personal responsibility, or that they are the one who is responsible for their choices as they get older and older. That I can just be with them and I can just love them and not give them instruction unless they ask for it. Because I may be the steward, I may be the parent, but that balance of masculine and feminine shifts the older that our kids get and the more capable they are in managing their own time, thoughts, energy, choices, all those things. This is also seen in the mentor-mentee relationship. The mentor is responsible for, the program and directing like what's going to be done, and the mentee shows up and is responsive. It's really fun to be in a class. I always was a really good student in college. I would sit usually close to the front of the class, and I would pay really good attention to everything that my teacher said and took really good notes and asked good questions and engaged with the class and responded to the things that my teachers were saying. And I had lots of professors and teachers in high school too that talked about how they loved working with me because I was responsive to their mentorship and to their leading, right? And so when you're in a mentor and a mentee relationship, the more polarized we can be, that the mentor really takes charge and like, this is the way things are going to be, and here's the instruction, and I'm going to lead and hold this space. And then the mentee shows up and is able to like receive and respond to that, like ask good questions, participate in the discussion, show up and be able to be vulnerable and sharing their feelings about the mentor's instructions. And then the mentor is responsible and careful with that mentee's vulnerability. That can be a really beautiful way to work the relationship. I think this is something that I believe and apply as a homeschooling mother. I utilize Thomas Jefferson education, leadership education principles, and one of the keys of great teaching is mentors, not professors. So, and I know I just mentioned like teachers and professors at college, but a professor is going to be up there teaching something and sharing, and like, this is the thing to share with you, right? This is from the textbook. You need to know this information. And I know all the things, and you need to go forth and learn the things that I know. But in a mentor and a mentee relationship, there's a recognition that both have things to learn, and that maybe the mentor may be a little bit farther on the journey that the mentee wants to reach, but there's a sort of respect there in a dynamic that's more engaged in a willing relationship, and a little bit of a tug of war. Not a tug of war, that's not the phrase, but there's like a tension there, not of just it's respect for the student's agency, so to speak, recognizing their will and factoring that in so that the teaching that is done is applicable to the mentee, right? There's a little bit more of a flexibility there. So I like the mentor-mentee model for teaching, especially when we look at things within the context of believing in God. If we believe in God, we believe there's something higher to which we are beholden. And I think that that's really essential for being able to create better things. And Jordan Peterson kind of talks about this, this idea of believing in God. He said, well, I act as if I believe in God. If we can believe in God in whatever concept that means we hold as truth. In my case, I do believe that God has a body, that God is an individual. And then I also believe that God influences through many other means and expressions. But if we act as if there is a God, and that we have something higher to which we are beholden to, that's really important to being able to have a sense of something that could be fruitful. And I think that part of where society is going is a rejection of God. and it's more tyrannical, right? It's like, we know the answers, you do what we say. It's like, that's not a loving relationship. That doesn't sound harmonious. Seems kind of controlling and just made up. That's because they're tossing out natural law. All right. But then, when it comes down to the individual, our conscious mind is acting from a masculine place. It's like, oh, this is the plan that I'm going to make for myself for my habits tomorrow, right? And this is the thing that I'm going to do and the instruction that I'm going to give. And then we also have our subconscious mind, and we have our bodies, right? As individuals, I believe our bodies are basically an expression of the subconscious mind in many ways. And how do you learn how to lead your body with love and support? That's that masculine and feminine dynamic. And learning to do that in a way that is respectful and loving and supportive. Yeah, that's important. So there's a little bit of the masculine and feminine dynamic. Hope you got an idea of the roles and how we can look at those. I'd love to hear in the comments section if you have any questions about, like, what does this look like in application in my life? Here's my situation. Comment below. I want to hear about it. Now, I mentioned the masculine and the feminine. I mentioned that, we might have hope for a better world if we believe in God. And what does that mean? To me, I think that the ultimate solution for hope is found in the forgiveness solution, which is really just a type of adopting a Christ-like way of being. So we may have a world, right, an orchard. We may have things in our lives that are going okay, but then we find that we have slugs, right? We have things that are disrupting the production of this tree's ability to produce fruit. We have things that come and get in the way and that seem to be something that's adversarial. But the forgiveness solution says, I don't have a slug problem, I have a duck deficit. If I add ducks to my orchard, they'll eat the slugs and fertilize my orchard. Forgiving has a lot to do with looking at the things that are unfair and recognizing the fact that, hey, these slugs, don't have stewardship over this garden. This wasn't their place. They didn't actually belong here. They weren't I didn't invite them in here. But it's also a recognition that, okay, I'm going to receive these and acknowledge them as good and receive them as a gift, receive them as an opportunity. The more that we can receive everything that we experience in our lives personally, in our marriages, with our children, as an opportunity to find a solution that will make things even better through a Christ-like willingness to take what is difficult and deal with it, and then to process it and give it back as an enrichment to what we have, the better able we are going to be able to act with hope in life. This is actually a transcendence of natural law. It's a form of charity. Remember before I was showing you how the harvest had a lot to do with charity. When we look at improving future harvests, when our future game is so strong that we're not looking just at the season that we have right now, but we're saying, yeah, how can things be richer and richer? How can I pay things forward so that the world is an even better place? That's when we start to get ideas about what we can do to bring forth good works that does actually make the world a better place. I would submit to you that whatever slugs you think are in your garden are giving you a really strong indicator about something that you could do to make the world better. And that's where I want to really end, is to just ask you this question. Are you ready to pivot from your personal hell to your personal mission? It's true there is a right and wrong way for us to treat each other. It involves taking personal responsibility, taking it personally upon ourselves to really take excellent care of the things that are ours and saying, yeah, I am going to be the one who shows up and does, everything that I commit to. I'm going to tend to it with devotion and love. It has to do with showing up and being vulnerable and being willing to receive love and to act from a place of sincerity and vulnerability and responsiveness so we can be engaged in our commitments in a way that is fulfilling for everybody involved. And sometimes people do not keep their responsibilities. They're kind of crappy gardeners, as I like to say. And sometimes people try to go digging around in other people's gardens. And sometimes there's no gardening happening whatsoever. It's just total neglect. So what do we do in those situations? Well, I would submit that acting more from masculine or feminine energy within the context of proper stewardship and assessing that for yourself is going to be a great first place to start. For example, in your marriage, if you think that your husband's not taking the kind of responsibility he should, stop taking responsibility for him and start acting from a place of feminine energy in your relationship with God. Acting from a place of expressiveness and vulnerability, and also from just being in tune from within, right? Being able to respond to the instructions that you have for yourself and seeing how that feels in your body. It's like, what are the choices that I could make that could bring a lot of joy and purpose, and living from that place of openness and vulnerability and trust about your own mission. That is a really great way to be able to stimulate hope, right? Let go of the criticism of your spouse. Forgive things that your spouse has or hasn't done. And then act from that place of feminine energy. Act from that place of joy in the relationship, of acknowledgement with respect for whatever it is that your spouse is doing. I mean, there's more to this. This isn't only a spouse issue, but it's just kind of on my mind. I've had a few friends reach out about troubles that they're having with their marriages and wanting to know how to shift the balance. And so that's why I'm mentioning that. But, is it your relationship? Is it something else that you want to contribute to the world? Is it the way that you show up as a parent? Is it the way that you show up in your relationship with God? All of the things that we do can be transformed into personal missions when we recognize right and wrong, and then we act according to the proper stewardship. Like, everything that is not yours, allow it to be somebody else's. Stop trying to take the consequences of others' actions from them. Let those be their own, and be able to transmute the pain of being with that so that you can just be with people. I've had a lot of things in my life that have been really painful to process, and every single one of them that I have been able to sit with have led me on the journey that I'm on now, to the kind of impact that I'm wanting to make on the world, and the things that both, I know that God would have me do and that I would do. And a lot of those things were rooted in pain. They were rooted in slugs. and they do actually give me drive to do some of the things that I'm doing and to talk about some of the things that I'm talking about. So I know that the things that are bothering you that feel hopeless are opportunities for you to be the one that you hope for. How can you be the one that you hope for? You'll have more hope if you can let other people's responsibilities be theirs, and that your responsibilities can be yours. Does it make it harder? when the people that you're in relationships with are maybe not doing their part to support you in the work that you would do, yeah, it does. It does make it harder when other people are not doing their part. And the faster that you can release them of the demand that they do their part, that can be a load that you don't have to carry anymore. You can give that load to Christ. He can hold that for you. He can carry that for you. And you can partner with him in creating, these duck solutions, these forgiveness solutions everywhere you go. Give those burdens to Christ and allow him to transform them into opportunities to be an agent for good, to bring forth goodness in every single moment. I mean, really, I think the personal missions that we can fulfill that transform hells into opportunities to serve ultimately come down to engaging a Christ-like way of being. And I think that the Joseph Smith quote that I shared at the beginning here about by proving contraries is truth made manifest, right? Understanding our place within the context of natural law, like the morality within that context. It's like, oh yeah, everyone takes responsibility for their own stuff. And then when they don't, like, what do I do? It's like, oh, well, I could take more responsibility for that. And I can hold space for somebody until they're ready to take responsibility for that. Or I can just let Christ hold those responsibilities and I can be free of that and forgive and not have to be the one who's holding a grudge. There's kind of two aspects of that, right? It's like, do we hold on to it? You don't have to hold on to the burden of it, even though I understand it and recognize it. Sometimes just being able to acknowledge that something hard's happening and that it isn't the ideal is really healing to being able, and it allows you to let it go. I know that whatever you're experiencing, you can transform it to be a benefit, not only to yourself, but to other people. And that is the game that we're all playing, is to learn how to do that. That is what gives hope. That is what gives purpose. Understanding right and wrong, and then being one who takes things that are not ideal and makes them a benefit within the context of a stewardship relationship with God. We don't have to be the only ones doing everything. We're never really alone in whatever it is that we're trying to create or trying to bring forth. And knowing that you aren't alone is a key piece in this too. If you'd like to learn more about how to do the inner work, the inner mindset work surrounding those forgiveness conversations, so to speak, that you would like to have from within, I'd love to share more information about that with you. I have a course that is opening up on June 7th, 2022, and it's an 8-week course, and it includes access to a private social media group. And the goal of the group and the course is to help you connect more closely with Christ in doing the mindset work that you do. I have a really simple, organic, and effective process for being able to release the blocks that are in your mind, the hurts that you have, so to speak, that make it harder to hear God's voice and to receive God's help. And if you're not having trouble hearing God's voice or receiving God's help, then by all means, keep doing what you're doing. You don't need my help. But if you would like some support in being able to address those thoughts that make it harder to do this work, to transforming what is difficult for you into things that you can give back to the world as a benefit, I'd love for you to join this 8-week course. It is called Christ-based parts integration. And I'm going to post a link to that in the description of this video so you can sign up for that. It's a really great opportunity to make Christ your life coach. I want the kind of hells that we are all experiencing and do experience because of the nature of our experience in life to be transformed, to be paid forward, so to speak, for a better world. And so this is my offering at sharing that. I think in a lot of ways it could take out the need for coaching and therapy. We need people who are able to be self-sufficient with their minds, who are able to recognize the hellish situations that they have for what they are, and to transform them with Christ and to fulfill their missions. And I would love to support you in connecting with Christ that way and realizing the beliefs that you hold within your mind, the programming that you have from social conditioning that is making it harder to hear that voice. God's closer than we realize, and he really truly is with us every step of this journey that is difficult. And it can also be so much more glorious and abundant and hope-filled when we connect more closely with him. Thank you so much for your time and for watching this presentation today. And I hope that you'll step into the mission that you have and create a hopeful solution from that.